What's good, people? Welcome to another video on my channel. So I just got off the earnings call for Square, Q4 2020 report, and I thought I would bring you a video dissecting everything that just went on in that call, what the CEO had to say about how the future is going to look and what the outlooks are for CashApp and the seller ecosystem. So let's get right to it. So at the time of this video, Square is currently sitting at $256.59. And you can see here that there is a downtrend in the stock price from a week's high of 283.19 to now where it's sitting at 256.59. And this is possibly because people are trying to grab their profits from the earnings call, but also a bunch of outlier market catalysts from tech stocks dropping because of bond yields from the government going up. So then let's get straight into the numbers and the financial information. So we can start off here in the Q4 reports and taking a look at the revenue. So between 2019 and 2020, we can see that there is considerable growth from Square overall. And this growth is significant because if you compare the numbers from 2015 to 2016, 2017, and onwards, you can see that the growth wasn't as high as it is right now. So this is almost doubling in revenue from $4.7 billion to 9.497. So moving on to the cost of revenue here, we can see that it's considerably high at $6.7 billion, but you can see that their total gross profit is also pretty high at $2.7 billion, growing from 1.8 in 2019. And then let's take a closer look at the operating expenses here. We can see that the net income is at a positive, so at a profit of $213 million, which isn't as high as it was in 2019 when it was sitting at 375. But here we can see, as a young company again, I believe that they were pushing for growth, so I don't mind this number too much. So then let's take a look at the year-over-year growth metrics. And we can see here, first things first is the total net revenue is growing at 101%. So it's doubling. And then if we take a look at the total gross profit, it is about 45%. And I do want to call out here that their total gross profit here is reducing from 46, 46, 55 towards 45, which isn't a great sign per se. But the numbers are really interesting to me because the revenue is growing, and that's what I really want to see. Now, moving on to the operating metrics here, we can see that the year-over-year growth of the gross processing volume is growing at 5.7% for the year. And in the past years, we've seen these numbers around 25, which also, again, gives me a warning in my head because that number isn't as high as it used to be in the past. So we see the gross processing volume at $112 billion, which is the number of transactions occurring on the platform between their seller ecosystem and CashApp. That number is the amount of money that Square is moving on a yearly basis. Okay, moving on to the segment information here. This is where they break down what's going on in the seller's ecosystem as well as CashApp's ecosystem. So let's start off with the seller's ecosystem here. We can see that the revenue is growing, but not as high as it used to in the past. So it's sitting at 3.5, where it used to be 3.4. And this is possibly attributed to the fact that COVID-19 pandemic has stopped a lot of people from going in-store to do a lot of purchasing. So that's why possibly this number has remained stagnant. So, and then if we look at the gross profit, right around the same number. But moving on to more exciting information here, which looks like CashApp ecosystem, we can see that the revenue has grown significantly, which is almost 5xing from 1.1 towards 5.9. And we can see that the gross profit as well has grown significantly from 457 towards 1.2. Looking at just the year-over-year growth here as well, I want to point out that the revenue here in 2019 was 27%, whereas the revenue year-over-year growth here is 2% in the seller ecosystem. And then moving on to specifically the CashApp ecosystem, we can see that First things first, the Bitcoin revenue is very high, growing from 210% towards 785%. This is a very exciting information to know because it shows that this business operation and this risk that they've taken is paying off in great amounts, the highest percentage of return on investment between all of their other investments. And then if we take a look at just the average revenue growth here, we see that it's sitting at 440%, which has grown considerably from the 157 in 2019. Now let's take a closer look at the Q4 shareholders letter that was just released. So starting off here, we can see in the highlights that we just discussed, the gross profit is growing at 52% year over year, and it's sitting at $804 million. And then when you segment them, you can see that CashApp is 377, growing at 162% year over year, and Sellers is growing at 13% and sitting at 427 million. And then if we take a closer look here at the CashApp ecosystem, something really interesting that we can look at is the monthly active customers. That has grown from 2019 to 2020 from 24 million users per month to 36 million users per month. And also a number I want to point out here is the cost of acquisition for each customer is now less than $5 per customer, which is very, very great news as they continue to scale forward. So then let's talk about the increased Bitcoin adoption. So we can see here that Bitcoin is getting more adopted every year. There are 3 million Bitcoin active customers in 2020, which is really great news. Bitcoin was just a recent addition to the product line inside of CashApp, and the fact that customers are willing to adopt that very easily is very, very exciting. Here we can see in quarter 4 2020, Bitcoin volumes per customer were up more than 2.5x year over year, which is over 200%, 250%. Very, very great news, like I just mentioned again. So now let's take a look at the seller ecosystem and see what's going on here. We can see that the omni-channel commerce for sellers is continuing to grow. And we talked about the gross payment volume, which is up again, 1/3 from 2 years ago. Very, very great news. And again, looking at the sellers market, I can tell that this hasn't been a core focus of 2020. Granted that the pandemic affected a lot of in-store visits in the retail and brick and mortar environment, especially for small businesses, which affected that business line a lot. And then if we take a look here, Square has kind of shifted their focus a little bit, not too much, but their seller ecosystem focused a lot on small businesses. But here we can see that they're attracting mid-market sellers. This is going to be really, really great for them if they continue to grow into the mid-market segment, because these mid-market companies are going to be using more, increasing the gross payment volume a lot more, which is going to increase the profits and the revenue streams for Square moving forward. And we can see here as well, going down to the financial discussion that we talked about again, 804 million in quarter 4, which we talked about, and the gross payment volume. These are 2 key metrics to continue to keep in mind as we continue to move forward on this. We can see between 2019's quarter 4 and 2020's quarter 4, the gross payment volume is continuing to grow as well. So now let's take a look at specifically CashApp ecosystem for revenue and profits. We can see here that 2020's gross profit is extremely higher than 2019, 2018, and 2017. So CashApp has become one of the growing product lines for Square very recently, which makes a lot of sense because a lot of businesses shifted into the online ecosystem. And we can see here that the return on investment from CashApp is growing a lot. So after 30 months, it seems like we're hitting close to the mark of 15x on the return on investment. Moving down to the earnings, we can see here that the net income, like we spoke about again, is sitting at $294 million in quarter 4. And if we take a look at quarter 1, that was a negative and a loss of $106 million, which recovered very quickly in quarter 2 to a profit of $11 million quarter 3 then 37 million, and then now we're sitting at 294. So this looks like a pretty good year. I wouldn't pay too much attention. Personally, I don't pay too much attention to the net income. It's a great number to look at, but again, as a company that's trying to scale, I'm more concerned about their revenue and their customer acquisition and how that's looking. And as we spoke about, the monthly active users is growing significantly for CashApp. Now, the two final things I want to talk about is the January trends and the forward-looking commentary about what's going to be going on for the rest of 2021. So if we look at the business trends here, they've identified for the seller's ecosystem. In January, the seller's gross profit was 15% year over year, which was an improvement compared to the fourth quarter that we just spoke about. In January as well, the gross payment volume was up 5% year over year, which is a very key metric to continue to pay attention to because Square needs to have more volume moving forward, more money being transacted through them. The seller's gross profit volume as well from card not present transaction was up 22% year over year, and that continues to grow from the online space. And then also from the card present transaction, the GPV was down 4% year over year, and there are a lot of changes happening there. Now moving on to the CashApp ecosystem, we can see that in January here, CashApp delivered 164% gross profit year over year, which was a considerable growth compared to 2020 Q4 that we just spoke about. So just in January alone, we can see that it's continuing to maintain that insane growth rate when it comes to CashApp. And also here they say that they've achieved strong growth in acquisition of net new transacting active CashApp customers and increased adoption of other products in our ecosystem. In January, CashApp achieved its highest monthly total of new transacting active customers for its Bitcoin, stock brokerage, and cash card products. Gross profit growth also benefited from customers pulling more funds into their CashApp accounts in late December and early January. This was driven by disbursements of government funds. So this, again, is another catalyst to keep in mind. So the $1.9 billion, that was $1.9 trillion, that was released by Biden, is what they're speaking about here when it comes to disbursements of government funds. Now, finally, let's talk about the investors' call tonight. So the first things first Jack Dorsey mentioned was the $170 million investment in Bitcoin again today. This is very interesting and exciting, granted that we just saw the revenue growth from Bitcoin transactions happening on the platform, which was 700%. So I can see why he would be doubling down on the investment that they made in October. Moving on to the products that they're focusing on, the two things we've already been talking about is the seller ecosystem as well as CashApp. And something he identified was the 6x return on investment from CashApp in the last 3 years. So CashApp itself has other product lines within it, first being the Cash Card, the Cash Boost, Bitcoin, and then stock investments. So we can see here that the two focuses that they wanted to talk about was increasing the transaction limits on CashApp to bring higher end customers onto the platform, as well as the seller ecosystem and growing the omni-channel and expanding their services globally. So then, they had a lot of questions being asked in the webcast. So now let's talk a little bit about the priorities that they mentioned for Square moving into 2021 and beyond. So they were asked about acquisition versus engagement when it comes to what their priorities are. And they spoke about how CashApp is the 50%, up 50% from transacting customers, and they just got their largest introduction of clients or customers onto their seller ecosystem here. So I can see here that the first thing that they mentioned was CashApp. So I believe CashApp is going to be a core focus of their continued business line when they move forward. But I also think that they're not leaving the seller ecosystem behind. They think the bigger picture is integrating both of those things together, and I'll talk more about that in a second. But also when we see here that they are going to be investing $800 million into three things here. 50% of that fund is going to be going towards marketing and acquisition. And as we spoke about before, it costs less than $5 to acquire one customer now. So they plan to use 25% of that investment towards research and development of their products, and then also 25% on general and admin stuff. So then when we look here, we can see that they're focused on the two verticals, the seller ecosystem and the CashApp. And also they were asked about when it comes to the investment on the CashApp platform, how are they going to go about with education? So the first thing they spoke about was they wanted to they already introduced news articles on the app, and they plan to expand that line into giving more information about better things for people to invest in and recommendation systems as well. They were also asked about their acquisition of Credit Karma, and the one thing they focused on the most was taxes. And they talked a lot about direct deposit, especially in relation to tax refunds, which is what they see as the beachhead market for getting into the direct deposit market, and then trying to expand that into payroll and people direct depositing their paychecks moving forward. One thing they were pretty excited about was their 36 million monthly active transacting users, which was up again 50% year over year. And then also when they were asked about competition when it comes to CashApp, they mentioned the competitors couldn't necessarily compete with them because of one single reason, being their multi-connected financial tool. So when we think about Venmo, especially, don't necessarily have the same features that CashApp does. And CashApp seems to be the driving leader in that industry, having Bitcoin integrated, Cash Card integrated, stock investments integrated. And the most interesting thing that Square can do is integrate both their seller ecosystem with CashApp ecosystem, and we can see that with their rewards from Cash Boost, what they also mentioned. So they plan to use the data on their local sellers to personalize rewards that their users can get from Cash Boost specifically. So this is really exciting to hear about because they know that they have the information and data from local sellers, and they're able to personalize it. That continues to grow that specific product line within CashApp. They mentioned investing 60% of their assets into CashApp in 2021 and 40% towards the seller. We can see that they're clearly leaning one way versus the other. So this is one thing to say because it has become their cash cow in a sense. Now, they were also asked about their Bitcoin versus government currencies and how they see that continue to change. And the first thing they mentioned was there was a strong adoption of Bitcoin by customers. So almost 1 million users quickly adopted it. And also, the second thing they really stood upon was the internet will have a native currency. And they were pretty bullish on the fact that Bitcoin would be that native currency because it was driven by multiple people and a consensus. And no third party had a control over that, which in turn kind of defines the internet. Now, to close things out, I kind of wanted to mention how these two ecosystems kind of directly intertwine. So we can see on the left side we have the seller ecosystem, on the right side we have CashApp, and we can see that the point of sale, payroll, managed payments, customer relationship management, business banking, developer platform, team management, online and hardware are all part of the seller ecosystem. And we see here that the peer-to-peer lending, cross-border, Bitcoin, stock investments, Boost, Cash Card, and direct deposit are all inside of the CashApp ecosystem. And these two directly intertwine, creating a locked system between businesses and consumers, which is really interesting because I want to see how they continue to integrate these two things. They already mentioned how Cash Card and Boost would be integrated with the seller ecosystem here. By CashApp customers being able to use their Cash Card to earn rewards through Boost from sellers on the Square's seller ecosystem and get personalized rewards through that. So that's really interesting to see how they're going to continue to integrate these two things moving forward. But this is a breakdown video on Square. So I just dropped a lot of information when it comes to financial versus the outlooks and the qualitative catalysts moving forward. So if you have any questions, let me know. I will also be giving more information about Square moving forward. So if you like this video, drop a like, drop a subscribe if you're new here, because I'll be bringing you more information, more value stocks to continue to invest in. So stay tuned for more.